All right, I think everyone is here. So, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I hope you're all having a good Thursday. I'm your host, Neftali Cabrales-Vick, FAFSA Outreach Coordinator for the North Carolina State Education Assistance Authority. And today we bring you this webinar to talk about the latest FAFSA updates, what we're seeing out in the field, and to share a few tips and resources with you. So first, just a few housekeeping items. We welcome all of your questions, so be sure that if you have questions, you're using the Q&A feature to put them in there for us. And note that this webinar is being recorded, so everyone who registered will get the recording as well as all of the presentation slides. And I just had one quick poll for you all, just to kind of check in with you and see how you're all feeling this FAFSA year. So on a scale from 1 to 5, will you rate how you're feeling? 1 being a little bit overwhelmed, overworked, maybe a little bit. 5 feeling great and ready to help students. You know all the updates, everything that's going on. Okay, I see your responses coming in. Okay, so it feels like most people are on that middle ground, number 3. You're in the middle. You're not feeling run down just yet, but you aren't feeling 100%. And we understand it's been a very difficult year. So we are right there with you. Thank you for answering that. I'll share the results so you're able to see how you're all feeling. Alrighty, so just to get started, we'll start with the latest updates. So we know that FSA has to verify the identity of all students and contributors, which also applies to those who are filing a paper FAFSA. So FSA has said that the paper verification process is going to consist of matching the name, date of birth, and address of student and contributor through TransUnion. So if the identity is not verified through that process, then the student is going to have a rejected FAFSA, and the contributor would have to do the online FSA creation process to be able to have their identity verified either through additional TransUnion questions or through that manual document upload process. We also know that students aren't going to be able to make corrections right away, probably until the end of March, although we don't have an exact date on that. And no emails are going to go out regarding when this is going to be available. So it'll be really important for counselors to remind students to go back to their FAFSA submission summaries and keep on checking to see when it is that they are able to make corrections. We know that applicants are not being able to see that they did not qualify or that they're not eligible for the Pell Grant through their FAFSA submission summary. However, they are able to see that information on their confirmation page. So if you have a student that's not sure whether they're eligible or not, make sure you guide them back to that confirmation page and they'll be able to see that. We also heard that the Pell Grant eligibility is not displaying for provisionally independent students on their FAFSA submission summary. And right now, we also don't know when that's going to be resolved, but we know that students aren't able to see that information. So it's just something for you all to be aware of. We also have heard from FSA that the process for contributors without a social security number to create an FSA ID is not working. So if you've had families that were having issues and previously were not able to create an FSA ID because the system wasn't working, they should be able to create that now. So if you could just remind them to go back and try it once again. We do know that there are 2 outstanding issues for families without a social security number. And one of them is going to be that the federal tax information is not going to be automatically pulled for contributors without a social security number. So even if they are filling out the online FAFSA, they're still going to have to enter their information manually. So this is important for you to remember so that you can tell those families what to expect. And then we also know that some students might still encounter errors while trying to invite their contributors. Um, And then also, we know that we've heard from FSA that many students are selecting the option to only be considered for unsubsidized loans, and many students do not mean to choose this option. FSA has worked on rewording that question to hopefully help students understand their options and know whether or not that's what they want to do. But this is something really important to talk with your students about once their FAFSA submission summary becomes available to them. Make sure they're going in and checking if they check this option, but they did not mean to. This would be the time for them to go in and make a correction and fix that. So those were the updates or the latest updates that we have. And now I wanted to share some resources with you all. First, I want to talk about the Finish the FAFSA report. So some of you might be familiar with this, but others might not. And this is a tool that we offer for school counselors. And this report is going to allow you to see which students have completed a FAFSA, who was selected for verification, and which students have errors in their application. You're also going to need a CFNC Pro Tools account in order to have access. Here on this slide, I have more information on how to request access. Again, you're all going to receive this slide, so don't worry about having to write this down. But you first will need a CFNC account using your school email. Then you'll need to submit a request for Pro Tools. And once you have that, you'll be able to request Finish the FAFSA access through that Smartsheet link. Now I wanted to give you just a little bit of a preview of what it looks like. So once you log into Pro Tools, you'll be able to click on that left corner menu bar and you'll be able to select College Reports and then click Finish the FAFSA and that'll take you to this main page. In the main page, at first, you're going to see some information on how we gather the data and permissible uses of this data for you all. Then when you scroll down, these are going to be new features that we're introducing for this year. So if you had finished the FAFSA access before, this is going to be new to you. First, you're going to be able to see to the left summary information for your seniors. So you'll see the total number of seniors that you have, the percentage and number of who submitted a FAFSA, who's completed, and the students that were flagged for verification. To the right, you'll be able to see the errors. Now you're only going to see the errors that your students at your school are having. You're not going to see every FAFSA error possible. And under that, you're going to see the error guide that is going to explain what each of those error means, and it's going to help you understand how to fix that error with your students. Scrolling down from that page, then you'll be able to see the individual student information. So all the way on the left, you'll be able to see the student name, then if they were completed or submitted, if it was signed by both student and parent, which is going to be really important this year as we've heard that we've had a lot of students experience glitches through the FAFSA and that a lot of signatures were dropped this year. This is going to be a very important column to pay attention to as you're working with your students. You'll also be able to see who was flagged for verification and if they had any errors. And again, you will be able to see an explanation on how to correct those errors so that you're able to inform your students. Next, I wanted to talk about the FAFSA tracker, which is now live on cfnc.org. So the tracker is available to everyone. It's not just for counselors. And so this tracker is going to give you information on the individual school level and also at the district level. So you'll be able to see submissions. And once we get completion data, you'll be able to see that as well. Again, right now, we only have submissions because FAFSAs are done being processed. And so you'll see that everyone is going to show a 0 for completion. But again, once we get that data from FSA, then you'll be able to see those completions for your schools and also for the district. Some video resources that I wanted to highlight for you. Earlier, we did a walkthrough of the FAFSA. So if you have students that are needing help filling out the FAFSA or parents that are needing help, this walkthrough goes line by line, and it's really going to show them how to fill it out if they're having trouble. You can find it on our CFNC page. Again, you'll get the slides, so you'll have the direct link to share with your students as well. Also, I wanted to point out that on our CFNC YouTube page, we have a lot of videos recorded there from our previous webinars. So coming up, you can share information about evaluating financial aid letters. That's going to be really important for students and families to have that information for when they start receiving those next month. So that's just an example of one of the recorded webinars that we have on there. So this is going to be a great tool for you as the year comes to an end to still be able to share valuable information with your students. So those were the resources that I wanted to share. And now we can get to the more exciting part of the webinar, our panel discussion. So today we have Devin McCarthy James and Brittany Privet from our CFNC rep team. And we also have Christy Newitt, counselor coordinator for the Cumberland County Schools. And they're going to discuss what they are seeing out on the field and how they're supporting counselors and students through this difficult FAFSA year. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you're able to see their faces better. So just one moment. All right, so you should be able to see them now. So I will open up the floor to you all, and I will start by just asking you, just what are you seeing? Like what's going on with students, with families? Just what information updates do you have to share?
Well, I think anybody who's on this webinar probably knows it's been a bit of a wild year, right? It's been a little chaotic. And the biggest thing that I've been encountering as I go into some of these FAFSA completion events and speak with counselors and students and families is that, you just kind of never know what you're going to encounter that day. We are, of course, seeing some common things. And Naftali, thank you so much for that introduction because you covered some of the things that we're seeing pretty regularly. I think all of us in the field with the technology glitches, some general, right? Some it's like you have to start a new browser kind of thing. And then some are very specific to the form itself, like the issue with signatures, right? The issue not being able to get those contributors in. So there's a lot of frustration, I think, not just with the form itself, but like connecting other people to the form has been a really big struggle that I've been seeing this year. And it's really led to a lot of unfinished FAFSAs where we thought we would hit the finish line at that completion event. But then we had to leave saying, okay, here's my information, here's these resources, please, we know that we don't have all the answers now, but we don't want to lose this process for you because we know how important it is. So that's kind of what I've been seeing anyways.
I can mimic that just coming from a larger school district and hearing from my high school counselors kind of some of the struggles they're getting from their parents. So it's been either that they know that they've entered the information and specifically parent information, or they're trying to connect their parent and then it says, nope, you haven't done this yet. So they can't really move forward. I think the two-way verification, if they're not in the room right then there with their parent to then push that button, has definitely been a challenge, along with just trying to plan FAFSA nights, because if you can get one but not the other, and they haven't done their FSA ID and they need help creating the FSA ID, but you can't get them both in the same room, that is extremely really frustrating. Whereas in the formal process, you didn't need them in the same room at the same time. You just needed the code, right? You just needed their information. So I think that has definitely been an issue for us. And then I think we have some students who themselves are documented, but their parents are undocumented. And so they're under the impression that they can't do it at all. And so what are the supports for those students? How are we communicating with them? I know there's been multiple updates even around that, and things like that. So I think it's also just our making sure we're able to serve all of our populations. And then, this kind of goes out to, I think, probably the people that are doing the work, the frustration of this demand of getting our completion percentages up, knowing that we are dealing with all of this, and helping those that are tracking that data understand that this is so much more than just people not doing it. We kind of have to overcome those barriers every year anyway of trying to convince families why they should or shouldn't do this. And trying to understand it, but now you add technology snafus, so now they're already frustrated, already don't want to do it, and then it doesn't work, right? So I think that another just district frustration is you want us to get our percentage up, but then the platform's not doing what it wants, or we don't have the data yet to see who hasn't finished, who hasn't completed, who has an error, to even be able to help those families, or are we even targeting the right students? So to mimic Devin plus a little more, I think this year has definitely probably been more challenging than anything, which we'll talk, I guess, about solutions or things we're trying to overcome that with, but that's kind of been some major barriers we're seeing in a larger district where we're trying to push this out.
I will say one thing that has been kind of the bright spot in this semester with the new rollout is that families are really understanding when you say in the very beginning that this has been a tough rollout and we are getting information out as we receive it, but there's still a lot that we don't know. So if something happens tonight when we're trying to fill out our FAFSAs and there's an issue, just know it's not your fault. We're really trying to push through this and solutions are coming at us as we progress through the semester. So I've seen frustrations and things like that, but I've started the beginning of FAFSA nights by saying what we don't know, what hasn't been working, and what we can do. And that's really kind of helped people come in with a little more patience. It's also helped them understand that we're all in this together. And it's really nice when you have a financial aid administrator there that backs you up and says, yes, we are still in the dark on some of this stuff, but we want you to get it done because the earlier, the better. I think telling people you need to fill out this form now, but you're not going to get results in a timely manner, you're not going to get results by a specific date. They get really confused, but really making sure that they understand that your FAFSA is time stamped. And so they are processed in the order in which they're received. So it is still important to complete this form, has really helped just kind of push down some of that frustration, and letting them know that I'm giving you all the information I know so far, and I'm not going to leave you alone on this. You are not by yourself in this process. You have multiple people who are working on the back end trying to get information out as soon as possible and as soon as we receive it. So that's, I would say, the helpful side and the bright side of this semester. Devin and Christy definitely talked about a lot of the stuff that we're seeing, and I agree 100%. But I think letting people know up front that we're all in the same boat has been really helpful and has kind of made it a lot easier to get through FAFSA nights.
I totally agree with what Brittany said. I think there's something interesting that's really happening this year, in that I think it makes a lot of us nervous that because of this sort of rollout in stages, there seem to be, sort of obviously like it's almost necessary to have more touch points, right, with these students and families. Every time there's an update, every time there's access to a new feature or something else that students, have to do or parents have to do, that kind of thing. And so, on the one hand, I think it makes a lot of us nervous because I think, we know how tough and all the demands that are on everybody's time, right? From the professionals trying to do this work to the students, to the families, everybody has other demands on their time. But at the same time, I am seeing some more community connectedness through this, right? Because we're telling them, we're here and you're probably going to need us, right? And so let's talk about what the next step. There's just, I'm feeling a lot of engagement too from families who are getting, I think, more support than maybe they would have asked for in a normal year, because they're being told this is abnormal. This is nothing you are doing wrong. And I think that's, one thing that's sort of a silver lining is that I am experiencing folks who, for a change, a lot of times I see a lot of self-recrimination, like, I don't understand this form, this is really frustrating, and it feels self-defeating. But this year, it's almost like, well, everybody's struggling with this form, and it's completely understandable that you're going to need a village to get through this process. So we hope we don't lose folks along the way, and I hope that we're doing a good job making sure everybody knows that we are here when they need us.
Thank you all for sharing that. That's really helpful to know your perspectives on that. And I also wanted to ask you, I know you touched a little bit on completion events and some of the things that you're saying to families, but do you have any tips for the counselors here in this webinar today on how to have successful completion events when everything has been changing so much and things sometimes don't work the way that they ought to or that we're expecting them to? Do you have any tips on how to try and get these events to be as successful as possible given the circumstances?
So I'm interested to hear kind of the success Brittany and Devin have had, because I know this is a main part of their current monthly job, this time of year. But I can tell you, I think for us, this is something, I mean, whether the FAFSA is working or not, this is a struggle we have no matter what, is getting parents and students engaged in this process and taking it as seriously as they need to, while also trying to break some of those myths, like I make too much money, or I don't want the government to have my information, even though it's information the government already has. Or, I'm going into, I have the military benefits, right? So I think for us, we are trying to navigate how to get some of that information out. We are trying to be creative in terms of where and how to meet them. We are a little late, unfortunately, in our district in terms of trying to get some of this. So we've got some strategies for next year for sure. But we have a partnership with our Office of Indian Education and the UNCP program. They actually have a FAFSA bus. And so we have reached out to them to try to get the FAFSA bus to come to at least some areas, not necessarily schools, but like grocery stores or places where parents might be, where they can hang out. We initially requested them to be able to be there during our spring break week, but unfortunately, that is also around the time that probably some of those FAFSA things are starting to come in actually into the admissions office and financial aid. And so they're having to process, right? So for us, I think because everything was pushed back so late, it's now we're trying to navigate just when and how to offer these things, knowing that students are also under the deadline of trying to make decisions for schools as they're even trying to figure it out. So one, we're trying to find a way to bring the support to where families might already be versus always making them have to come to us, along with trying to just get the message out about like why it's important, like how it matters. We have a current grant in our district that is basically helping grow and support counselors and social workers that are learning to be counselors and social workers. And so that coordinator was a former social worker. So she actually sent me a template letter that she found through like a homeless email. I'm supporting our McKinney-Vento students. That was a template email that actually walks through like, these are the things you need. This is how you create this. Like, this is who this applies to. This is if you're an independent student. So we've gotten that out to our communications office to try to push that out as well. I'm trying anytime that I get an update literally from Kathy and NCSEAA, like I am pushing that out to my high school counselors, like, hey, here's a webinar for you guys to watch. Here's some videos. Like, but I think, yeah, I don't know that this is really an answer, but I think we are trying to figure out where and how to meet our families. Is it communicating with churches? Is it going to some of the local events that we can? Is it trying to partner with some of our local universities? We've talked about trying to reach out again to like FTCC, Methodist, Fayetteville State to see if they'll help us now that we know the bus we can't get the bus as much as we want. So I think we've definitely got a great plan for next year, knowing that some of these complications hopefully won't be here, but they might. But also just trying to break some of those barriers. So I'm definitely interested to see how some of those FAFSA nights have gone, because I know when we were offering ours earlier, they weren't as successful because the link wasn't working. So to hear maybe of some success of some recent ones would be helpful, and maybe ways or incentives you brought out. The other thing we are also trying to push is that next scholarship where, hey, if you fill the FAFSA out and you're going to a UNC community college or university, you're going to get an automatic, right? So we're also trying, and you meet the qualifications, but trying to also push some of that stuff out as well. Marketing.
So I will say I'm super lucky because I am in the region of Christy Newitt and the FAFSA bus. So I have some really passionate people in Southeastern North Carolina who are really pushing FAFSA completion. For us down here, it's an access mission where we want to provide as much access to our students and families to tons of different education resources that we have down here in Southeastern North Carolina. But one thing I have learned in this college game is that if you feed them, they will come. So I have a school here, North Brunswick High School. They have my favorite mascot in the area. They're the Scorpions, and they have a parent who owns a food truck. So he brought his food truck to FAFSA night, and if you came to FAFSA night, you got free dinner, and you got to choose from the menu. So it wasn't a slice of pizza, it was a full meal. And so we had about 30 people show up for that FAFSA night, and it was fantastic. It felt like a community event because it was a parent from that high school that had the food truck. And students and families came with questions. One thing that I've found in the past, I would say year with this new FAFSA, is a lot of our attendees are students who are coming from families who are going to have a special circumstance. So a lot of times the people who are coming to these FAFSA nights are the ones that are going to need the most help when it comes to navigating the form, navigating the site. So having a financial aid administrator on site is really helpful. While I present on FAFSA all the time, I wouldn't say I'm a tax expert. I'm not an accountant. So I always love having somebody who has processed FAFSAs before on site so that they can answer those nitty-gritty questions, because sometimes students and families just want to make sure they're putting the right information because they don't want to get in trouble with the federal government. So there is still that apprehension of like, if I put the wrong number, am I going to get audited and get in trouble? So making sure that we have professionals on site, making sure that there's food there. And one of our colleagues in the 336 area code, Tequila, mentioned that having a kiddie corner is really smart. So there's going to be siblings that come. And luckily in Robeson County, I had a FAFSA night where we were in an art classroom. So I set aside a table just for the kids, and we had paper, pencils, colored pencils, all of that stuff. And they just hung out in the corner so that we could really dig deep into tax information with their families. So there wasn't that distraction of childcare. And that was really helpful because the kids felt like they had their own space. They didn't have to just sit still and listen to FAFSA information all night. So that's been really helpful, is making it more of a community style event, like come get help with this form rather than come fill out your form. It's more of come get assistance with this federal form that can sometimes feel a little daunting or intimidating. And I feel that a lot of my FAFSA events this semester have been successful because of that feeling of not only is my mom coming, but my little brother's coming too. We're going to eat dinner together and we're going to complete this form that's going to take me a step further in my future. So kind of I work in Southeastern North Carolina, so I have a lot of rural areas that do feel like really small communities anyway. So that's just the feel and the nature of this area. But I think a lot of the FAFSA nights that have been centered around the community have been a lot more successful.
Yeah, I love those kind of like, it feels like you're at a barbecue, right? Like everybody's getting FAFSA done, you got some food. I do think it does make a difference when it's a community focus, like bring a little bit of fun in there to lighten the mood, because it's tough, right? It's not a fun activity during FAFSA. So if you can bring a little bit of fun in there, I think that's awesome. One thing that I really loved this year is one of my schools actually does a daytime event, does like a all day. They have parents come in, families come in and sign up for slots. And then when the family's in the media center, then they call in the student and work on FAFSAs. And it's very well attended. I know that not every place you can do a daytime event, but this one, they bring in a lot of professionals. So, we had several different 2- and 4-year college financial aid folks. We also had their international student advisor to help from one of the colleges. I was there. We had college access professionals. And this year I was really excited because we even enlisted the help of a local legal services agency that is a nonprofit that helps with specifically immigration and tax issues. And this is a school that has a very high it's a very high Hispanic area, right? A lot of those immigration issues pop up there. By no means is it only there, but it's just like Brittany said, a lot of those tough situations, those are the families that are coming in for help. So having those folks on hand, even if they couldn't solve the current FAFSA issue, kind of knowing that they had that resource available to them as well, just to either connect with there at the event or, connect with later to help support them. That was awesome. And one of the best things about that event was because the FAFSA has been changing so much this year, we had group huddles of professionals like off to the side, like, okay, this is a particularly complicated one. Let's all do a group think. Let's just like, what do we think? Because sometimes there aren't obvious answers to some of these more complicated family situations, tax situations, all those things. And so I really think more than ever, it's so important to stay connected with all the different community organizations and other, school supports and all the folks to come together to brainstorm together and to learn together. I think that professional community is super, super important this year because there's no way any one of us is going to know everything. It's just not possible with the way things have been changing so much this year.
I also just want to add, counselors have a lot on their plates right now. And so what we have tried to do is to try to remove it and do it more as a district initiative than an individual counselor. And if individual schools want to do something, that's great, but they are feeling the stress right now. It has just been a year in general. And now this kind of just feels like one additional thing that normally wouldn't be happening at this time of year. Usually we would have kind of hit this ground and running, and now it's like the little stragglers at this point. So that's one thing my district is trying to do between myself and our CTE department that deals with career and college development. We are trying to put our heads together using our resources, similar to what both Devin and Brittany are talking about with that community initiative, but trying to take some of that responsibility off. So if you are a person on here that is at a district level, please consider that. If you are a counselor that's in a school and you are drowning, because I know you all are, and trust me, you are still doing a phenomenal job. And it's not supposed to be like this, but unfortunately that's our normal right now. Advocate. If you have if you have a coordinator, or if you have an executive director or somebody that you can reach out to, or ask your principal to advocate for, is there a way to take this initiative outside of just a school-based thing, but a district level, especially if you have more than one or two high schools in your county, right? So I recognize we may have some large LEAs, smaller LEAs. We have 18 high schools. So, for us, we're going to try our best to try to support them from a district level. So I think that's the other thing that we're really trying to do is support it overall versus saying, hey, this is on y'all, you tell us what you've done, kind of thing. So
I love that you brought that up, and I have a great example of that. So thank you so much, Christy. New Hanover County Schools this year decided to do it at the district level rather than at each school. So we held 2 FAFSA nights, one in the northern side of the county and one in the southern side of the county. And we had over 70 people at both. We gave information about this FAFSA and where to receive help. And we had our local colleges, so Cape Fear Community College and UNCW, present what the FAFSA looks like at their school when it comes to processing and what scholarships are available. And then we were done. So it was an hour of people's time. We presented the information. We also had physical people there who can help with the FAFSA. If you set up an appointment, we talked about the State Employees Credit Union. And it was very, very well attended. So well attended in the fall that we decided to do it again this spring. And so we had another FAFSA night this spring that was very well attended as well. But one thing that New Hanover County Schools has done as a follow-up is they've created postcards for all of their high school seniors with QR codes directly to set up an appointment with Cape Fear, to set up an appointment with UNCW, or to find FAFSA resources on CFNC. So it's a small postcard with 3 specific QR codes so that students have the understanding that I need to do my FAFSA. but this is where I can go for help. I'm not alone in the process. Again, this is not a singular this is a process that people can do together. One thing I do want to remind people of when we're thinking about initiatives and thinking about supporting students through the FAFSA is that not all students are eligible to complete a FAFSA. So I would definitely make students aware that if you are eligible, please complete a FAFSA, and make sure that we use inclusive language, because we don't want certain students to get to a FAFSA night and realize that they're not able to complete a FAFSA because of their status, and things like that. We don't want to alienate students. So making sure that we use appropriate language when we are pushing students to complete this form, and making sure that students and families know alternatives as well. So if you aren't able to complete a FAFSA, having different alternatives like scholarship applications on hand, or in scholarships that they would actually qualify for on hand, so that they know that college is still a possibility for them, but they just may have to take a different route to get the funding. So making sure that we're being inclusive in this process.
Ooh, Brittany, and you made me think of one more thing. So also, and I mean, I might get in trouble for this, but we are also very strategic in terms of who we are passing this out to. I know everybody wants 100%, but in my world, that's just not feasible. I'd rather have 100% of the people that really need to fill this out. And so I encourage my counselors to do a bound for survey, to kind of understand where and who are our students trying to go, right? So if they are saying that they are bound for or looking to go to any 4-year, 2-year trade school, or they don't know, those are the students that we're targeting to complete that FAFSA application. If they say we're going military or we're going employment, not that it's not important, but they are not our number one target at that point in time, because if that's really where they're going, they don't at this point in time need a FAFSA application. Whereas those kids that are absolutely saying, this is my next step, they really do need to do it, especially those undecided, because they could decide last minute, I want to go do a community college. And now guess what? They don't have that, right? So I think that's the other thing too, not only being aware of who can fill one out, but also what group of students maybe do you put that priority on, rather than trying to chase down a kid that in the end is saying, I'm going to enlist right now, or I'm going to go where I got my certification through College and Career Promise and I'm going to go be a welder, right? So I think those are the other things just to be aware of, and in terms of knowing your students and what are those, building those relationships and knowing kind of what their plans are.
That's a great point. I mean, I think it's of course a dream that we want everybody to know what they might possibly qualify for, if they do choose to go that route. Unfortunately, this year, even though, so even folks who are filling it out are still not getting the results in that timely fashion. And so there's some of that struggle. That's kind of what was popping to my mind, is that, it's interesting because there's two layers. There's so many layers to this really this year. We've got folks who are getting through it. I've actually had some families that got through it very easily because they didn't really have a lot of barriers, and they actually were doubting that they did the right things because they got through it so easy. And other people have been having so many struggles, but then because they've got it submitted, they're in this waiting period, right? Everybody's waiting to find out sort of what they qualify for. Adding other elements to this, I've gotten a lot of questions from students and families about scholarship applications, because there's scholarships that have not updated their information are requiring FAFSA results. And if you are not in touch with the fact that FAFSA results, aren't out there for students necessarily, you might think you can't apply to that. And so we're seeing a lot of confusion, in multiple realms of the financial aid realm, right? Because we've got some students who don't think that they can apply for a scholarship because they're asked, the application says FAFSA, or and I've actually had conversations with some scholarship organizations that are doing a good job thinking this through and saying, hey, we do have deadlines to meet that are prior to the FAFSA. So here are some other things you can provide in order to establish income, that sort of thing, that need eligibility. So it's an important reminder that the FAFSA is not the only thing affected by the FAFSA, right? is that it's really impacting all these different ways that students access aid. And so we're seeing a lot down the chain that I think it's important to remind our students, ask questions, right? If it says you're going to have to submit the FAFSA and you don't have that FAFSA, reach out, ask if there's something else you can provide, or can you provide those results at a later time. That does not mean you don't apply.
Thank you all for sharing that. Those are some very great tips. And I also wanted to ask you all to share just how have you been staying informed? We know that everything's been changing so quickly sometimes. Sometimes we tell students one thing and then we learn that it's actually going to be another way. And so how are you all staying informed and up to date with all the changes that are happening? Do you have any resources specifically to share with the counselor so they too can stay up to date with everything that's going on? I know, Christy, you mentioned our newsletter alert and things like that. So I was wondering if there was anything else that you're also doing to stay informed.
Yeah, I would say that it really, honestly, I've relied on y'all and CFNC. I mean, whenever I see the emails come through, that's usually the first thing that I look at. And then I try to figure out, okay, have I already watched this or have I already been a part of this? And then trying to forward it out to my counselors and trying not to, overload their inbox, but just kind of sending, hey, friendly reminder, like there's some new stuff in here. So those are probably the two main resources. And then I will say I have a superintendent that will keep me included in certain things. So there was recently a large district consortium meeting, and there were some resources provided by NCAN, the National College Attainment Network. And so he sent us that, and that included like a toolkit and some other things. So I try to just kind of look at who is sending me what and what looks official versus what looks like maybe an advertisement for something. So sorting through those and then pushing those options or resources out to my counseling staff as well.
Yeah, and I've had to rein myself in this year because there's been so many updates. I've always kind of sent out emails to local counselors and college access folks and other community organizations with regular updates and events and things like that. But this year I tried to be a little bit more intentional, and no more than twice a month, I send out an actual newsletter. So it's like intentional. This is what I know as of this date that's on this document. Because things have been changing so quickly. And that's been, there's pros and cons to that, because I've definitely sent out newsletters and then the next day the federal government makes a different announcement. And so that's hard not to send out every single announcement, but I know how inundated these counselors are with emails. So it's not helpful if they're getting a million emails about the same thing. So hopefully the folks who are getting my newsletter find them useful and not overwhelming. But I am trying my best to share those NCAN things, those federal updates, and then, of course, local opportunities as I see them for students to get connected. I think that one thing that actually I got to shout out to Dr. Juanes Ramirez. He sent us an email this morning with some reminders of a list, not only of established, we have some established Hispanic serving institutions in the state, but we've got a lot that are working towards that designation that are doing great work with students who really need extra support a lot of times in the process. So I've asked April Query to share that link with y'all so you can connect with purposefully those students who might really benefit from connecting to those organizations going through this process and as they transition into the next level. That's one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about as students are looking at these financial aid offer letters or lack thereof and trying to make decisions that based on finances, are we connecting them maybe with some community college options that are used to serving those students so that once we no longer have them in front of us, right, because these seniors are graduating all too soon, who's going to help them next when we don't have them in front of us anymore. So I think that connection of like ongoing support for those students and families is also a really important piece of where are we getting our information? Well, where are students and families going to continue getting their information?
And I don't have much to add because Christy and Devin definitely talked about the resources in which we receive a lot of information. Because SEAA is our funding partner, it's nice to have them close because we get a lot of information from them to disseminate out to our partners. I am in schools a lot, so I like to not only inform, but also ask questions. So making sure that I know what's happening on the ground, and working with financial aid offices across the state or across my region specifically to make sure I'm up to date on what's actually happening on the practitioner side of things. It's because yes, a lot of the updates are rolling in, but technology does what technology wants to do. And so making sure that it's actually working properly and doing FAFSA nights to make sure that I have as much information as possible so that I can make sure that students and families are prepared when they come to these FAFSA nights is really nice. The FSA Training Center has been really helpful as well. So you can sign up for updates through the Federal Student Aid website as an educator, and that's been extremely helpful. They've done a lot of great, I would say, a lot of great webinars, but also just updates and emails and things like that. Also, social media has been really helpful. Following FSA on Instagram so that you can get bite-sized updates, because reading FAFSA updates sometimes can feel like you're reading another language. So having those quick bites of information on social media has been really helpful as well.
And one last thing, I cannot believe I haven't mentioned this yet because I almost take it for granted because I check it a bunch, but those alerts that come through from SEAA, that information is ending up in the NC FAFSA Hub site as well. So make sure, because that's got a lot of resources. I love the searchable resource page. So sometimes we've gotten so much updated information this year. Sometimes I'm like, wait, I know I saw something about that, whatever topic I'm about to talk about. I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to search the resource page real quick, make sure I know all the resources that are available.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing that. And my last question that I had for you all was, and you've started to touch on it a little bit, was just how are you helping students prepare for their next steps? So we know right now we are very focused on FAFSA, but we know that they're also going to have to start reviewing financial aid letters, award letters very soon. We're going to have to commit somewhere. There might be flagged for verification. And so there's steps to that. So how are you, along with focusing on FAFSA completion along the way, how are you introducing students to these other topics that are also very important for them?
Well, one thing go ahead.
No, I was gonna say you can go first. That's fine. Yeah, go. I'll join you. I'll jump in after you.
Okay, cool. Thanks. One thing I've really been trying to do is celebrating as soon as they're done with the student portion of the FAFSA. As soon as they get done and they sign that portion, and if you've worked with me before, I am not short on energy. I try to make sure that I make sure that their counselors know, and we do a big thing. And we have FAFSA stickers that students really enjoy. So I've been giving them their sticker and making sure everybody knows, oh my gosh, Jose just finished his FAFSA or the student portion, and making sure they understand how big of a step it is, because it is such a trying time within filling the FAFSA. Sometimes they feel like, okay, I got that done, but then I still have so much more to do. Making sure that they understand that it's a big deal. You just completed a federal form, and I am so proud of you. Here are your next steps, but take a second to celebrate yourself and make sure that you know that you're taking steps forward and you're not staying still right now. I think has been really helpful, and you can see their faces light up when their counselor's like, oh, I'm so proud of you. So that's been really helpful. Also making sure that they understand that the next steps are steps towards not just high school graduation, but college graduation. So you are already making moves towards having a degree. And that is a very big deal, regardless of where you're going to college. Making these steps, you are making a step towards your actual future, and really encouraging them in a way that feels hopeful and not necessarily daunting. Like you're not checking boxes, you are truly moving forward in life. And so I really like to make sure they understand the perspective of it all, because sometimes this part of the process, they're still in high school, they're still waiting for a high school graduation, they still, have to, they're ruled by the bell and going to classes and things like that. Making sure that they understand that you are making steps towards a really cool time in your life. But also making sure and empowering them to form a relationship with the college before they start is extremely important. Finding your people on a college campus and making sure that you have a good idea of what offices are there to support you before you enroll is really important. So making sure that they understand that you can call the admissions office even after you're accepted. I come from the admissions world, and their job is to hold your hand through the process until you step foot on campus as a current student. So letting them know that you can still call and ask questions, and there are no stupid questions along the way. This is your first time doing this, and so it's okay to not know everything. Also letting them know that financial aid is not a scary office. I think sometimes the way the media portrays financial aid, it feels a little sterile and scary, but all of the financial aid administrators I work with are really warm and fuzzy and really, really want students to succeed. So really empowering them to ask questions, reach out to these colleges, because it is an investment in your future and you deserve to get everything out of this investment. You are paying for this, regardless if you are paying out of pocket or paying with grant funds or scholarships. This is your future. So really empowering them to think of this as a new mountain to climb, more so than this daunting task, this next thing that I have to get through in life, has been really kind of fun in this process. That's my favorite part of the process, is making sure that students believe in themselves as they transition and matriculate into higher education.
So the only thing I would add to that is, and I think this is just supporting our students in general, and this will come down to, do you have counselors that work 12 months or not? If you don't, are there funds, which we all know those are limited in terms of support, but there is a program out there, an initiative called Summer Melt. So making sure that your students don't melt away over summer, especially those first generation college students or ones that maybe don't have as much support at home, so that they don't then end up finishing the process so that they can then start on that campus the next year, right? So whether it's, if you don't have the support over the summer to be, following kids, following those certain kids up, that kind of thing. Maybe it's you provide your seniors with a checklist of, hey, you may have gotten this diploma, you may be good to go, but if you are planning on doing the following next year in the fall, these are the things you need to be checking in on, right? So did you sign your award letter? Like, do you know how much money you've got? Have you signed up for a dorm room yet? Have you put your deposit down? Like, have you signed up for your classes? Do you know if there's an orientation over the summer? Like, little things like that I don't think they're always thinking about. And so this is beyond just the financial aid support, but it's also just the actually doing the things to actually make the admissions process happen. Did you request your final transcript to get sent from us? And then I think, on top of that, yeah, I mean, once again, it just comes down to that relationship and really just being able to check in with your kids. And, I know some of us have caseloads that are way bigger than, we're going to know all of them individually. But I think if you can try to identify some ways to overcome some of those barriers, it's definitely helpful for sure. And I think it's also encouraging them. They can continue to fill out scholarships, right? There are some scholarships that aren't due until the middle of June. Apply for those, right? Same thing with the FAFSA. We all know that it's going to go through until next year for next year's money. Now, the later you wait, obviously, the less grants and scholarships are available. There's maybe some more loans involved, but it doesn't mean you still don't attempt to apply. So if you haven't started it now, that's okay. Start it, do it now. That kind of thing.
And both of y'all said amazing things, and I can personally vouch for that. Brittany cheers on every single student that she meets, and I love it. But I did want to add that one thing that I think some schools around me are trying, just on a school-based level this spring, is to do smaller more frequent chunks of college support. So like 30 minutes, and they had me come in and talk about RDS. We did just that little piece. You know, they bring in the local community college to talk about another piece. But they're doing small chunks over time, which I think just when we think about some of our students that aren't always great about advocating for themselves, right? And reaching out, I think that strategy can really help for students, as opposed to that one-off where they come to like one big thing and then you don't hear from them again. Right? So that has value of that, like repeated check-ins over time, relationship building, like these folks already mentioned, of course, but also because it emphasizes the process of this, right? That you keep having things to do. Even once you get to college, you still have things you've got to do, right? There's like sort of, you know, this is sort of an intro to adulting in some ways, right? You've got this form you got to take care of so that you can go to do that thing. You got to talk to that person so that you can do that other thing. So I think some of that process learning is also helpful in making students helping students realize like the next steps.
And please, I know we all do this, but I would be remiss if I didn't say they have to check their email every day, multiple times a day. But it is imperative that they check their email every time, especially when we're in a time like this where new FAFSA information is coming at them every which way. Making sure that they're checking their email every day, because a lot of this information is time sensitive. And so if you don't answer an email within a certain amount of time, money may be gone. So really encouraging them to check their email every day.
Well, thank you all so much for all your wonderful feedback and just input that you've offered today for our counselors. I know it's been an especially challenging year, and so I know that your input is very appreciated as we're trying to think of new ways to support our students. So thank you all so much for your time today. I just want to remind everyone that this was recorded, and so it is going to be sent out